I never told my daughter about the $5 million in cash and gold I hid in my storage vault, right in the city center. But when she got married, her greedy husband broke in with a crowbar, snarling furiously, "This treasure is mine!" My panicked security guard called me, and what I did next made him scream in pure terror, as he realized he'd walked straight into a trap he could never escape. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is in your region right now. My name is Cecil Harrison. I'm 68 years old, living in North Las Vegas, Nevada. Spent 2 decades building a chain of 7 pawn shops across the state before selling out 2 years back for a comfortable retirement. I learned to read people like open books in that business. Desperate folks, liars, thieves, I've seen them all walk through my doors. Thought I'd seen everything. Then my daughter brought home Kyle Morgan. Danielle is my only child. She's 31 now, smart as a whip, regional manager for a hotel chain. After her divorce 3 years back, she went through a rough patch. Lonely, vulnerable. That's when Kyle appeared, like a vulture circling wounded prey. Real estate agent, charming smile, all the right words. They married 8 months ago. I didn't object out loud. What father wants to push his daughter away? But every instinct I'd honed over 20 years in the pawn business screamed that something was wrong with this man. The first real warning came at our family barbecue in June. Summer heat hung heavy over my backyard, the grill smoking with burgers and ribs. Danielle was inside making potato salad when Kyle sidled up to me, beer in hand, that practiced smile on his face. "So, Cecil," he said, voice casual but eyes sharp, "Danielle mentioned you did pretty well with those pawn shops. Must have been quite the nest egg from the sale." I flipped a burger, kept my tone neutral. "Did all right. You know," he continued, leaning against the deck railing, "I was thinking, now that we're family, maybe we should discuss how to manage the household finances together. Pool our resources, you know. Family money should be shared, right?" I looked at him then, really looked. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Those eyes were calculating, measuring, weighing what I might be worth. "Kyle," I said, setting down my spatula, "you and Danielle both have good jobs. What exactly are you struggling with that requires my resources?" The smile tightened. "Just thinking about the future, that's all. Building something together as a family." Danielle came out with the salad then, and Kyle's expression shifted instantly. Warm, loving, the perfect husband. But I'd seen behind the mask. The rest of that afternoon I watched him. The way his gaze lingered on my watch, on the car in my driveway, calculating value with every glance. 2 weeks later, I came back early from my weekly poker game, forgot my reading glasses. As I approached my study, I heard the distinctive creak of my desk drawer, the one that always stuck. I stepped into the doorway and found Kyle frozen, his hand inside my desk, rifling through papers. "Looking for something?" I asked quietly. He jerked upright, that smooth smile clicking into place like a weapon being drawn. "Cecil!" Danielle asked me to grab her birth certificate. "She said you kept important documents in here." "Birth certificates are in the filing cabinet. Left side, second drawer." I pointed across the room. "That's my personal desk." "Right, right," he laughed too loud. "Got confused. This house has so many drawers." He left quickly after that. I checked what he'd been searching through. Bank statements, investment portfolios, property deeds. Nothing was missing, but he'd been looking, hunting. The pattern continued. At dinner the following week, Kyle complained constantly. "It's just so unfair, you know," he said, cutting into his steak. "We're both working our tails off, and we can barely make ends meet. Meanwhile," he gestured around my dining room, "well, some people have it easier." "You make $78,000 a year," I said, my patience wearing thin. "Danielle makes $94,000. That's $172,000 combined. The median household income in Nevada is $71,000. You're doing more than fine." His jaw tightened. Danielle touched his arm, trying to smooth things over. "Dad, everyone has different expenses. Kyle's just stressed about work." But it wasn't about work. It was about what he thought I had, what he believed he was entitled to simply by marrying my daughter. I started watching more carefully after that. Noticed how he steered conversations toward my finances, asked pointed questions about my retirement plans and whether I had proper estate planning in place. The concern in his voice was as fake as a cubic zirconia in a gold setting. The final straw came during a quiet evening at my place. Danielle was traveling for work. She's gone roughly 180 days a year, managing hotels across the Southwest. Kyle had stopped by, ostensibly to check on me. We were having coffee when he brought it up again. "You know, Cecil, Danielle and I have been talking," he began, though I doubted Danielle knew anything about this conversation. "With her gone so much, we worry about you here alone. Have you thought about what happens to all this?" He gestured vaguely. "If something happens to you." "I'm 68, not 98, and I've got a living trust set up." I sipped my coffee, watching him over the rim. "Everything's arranged." His eyes sharpened. "A trust? Is Danielle the beneficiary?" "My affairs are in order. That's all you need to know." I saw it then, the flash of anger before he controlled it. Raw, ugly resentment. This man didn't love my daughter. He loved what he thought came with her. Me, my money, my assets. He'd married her as an investment, and now he was getting impatient for his return. That night, after he left, I sat in my study among my collection of antique watches. 140 pieces accumulated over decades. Each one a reminder that timing is everything, that patience and precision matter. Some mechanisms take years to build, but when they finally move, every gear clicks into place perfectly. I realized then that Kyle Morgan wasn't going to stop. He'd keep pushing, keep manipulating, keep trying to get his hands on what he believed was his by marriage, and sooner or later, he'd drag Danielle down with him. Something had to be done, but it had to be done right. I didn't sleep much that night. Lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan turning lazy circles, thinking about how I'd gotten here. When had my life become a chess game against my own son-in-law? My mind drifted back to when Danielle was 7. She'd come running into my pawn shop after school, pigtails flying, to show me a test with a gold star on top. "Daddy, look! I got every question right." Her smile had been pure sunshine. I'd closed the shop early that day, taken her for ice cream, told her how proud I was. She'd hugged me so tight, ice cream melting forgotten in her cone, and whispered, "You're the best daddy in the whole world." Where had that little girl gone? When had she stopped seeing that I was trying to protect her? The change had been gradual. After her divorce from Marcus, that was 3 years back, she'd pulled away, threw herself into work, traveled constantly. I understood. She was healing. But that isolation made her vulnerable, made her lonely. And Kyle had spotted that loneliness like blood in the water. I remember the first time she brought him home. Spring, about a year ago. He'd been charming. Deferential, even. "Mr. Harrison, Danielle's told me so much about you. 20 years in the pawn business? That takes real skill, real judgment." He'd said all the right things. But I'd spent 2 decades watching people try to sell me stolen goods with earnest faces. Kyle had that same energy, calculated sincerity. Still, I'd bitten my tongue. Danielle seemed happy. Who was I to interfere? Maybe my instincts were wrong. Maybe 20 years of suspecting everyone had made me paranoid. But my instincts weren't wrong. They never had been. The next morning, I made a decision. If Kyle was hunting my money, I needed to know exactly how dangerous he was, how far he'd go. I needed a professional. I found Lindsay Adams through a former customer, someone I'd helped years back who owed me a favor. Former FBI agent turned private investigator, 44 years old, with a reputation for thorough, discreet work. We met at a diner on the edge of town. "Mr. Harrison," she said, sliding into the booth across from me, "your friend says you need background work done." "My son-in-law, Kyle Morgan, 34, real estate agent. I need to know everything. Where he goes, who he meets, what he's hiding, especially financial information." She studied me with sharp, intelligent eyes. "You want to know if he's a gold digger?" "I want to know who my daughter married. My retainer is $5,200 for 3 weeks of comprehensive surveillance. If I find something, the report will be detailed. If I don't, I'll tell you that too. Fair?" I pushed a check across the table. Fair. 3 weeks felt like 3 months. I went about my routine. Poker games, watch collecting, morning walks. But everything felt suspended. Waiting. Danielle called twice. Voice bright from a hotel in Phoenix. "How are you doing, Dad?" She sounded happy. Kyle must have been on his best behavior. Doing fine, sweetheart. You take care. I wanted to warn her, wanted to say, your husband is not who you think he is. But without proof, she'd never believe me. She'd think I was the paranoid old man trying to control her life, pushing her away. So I waited. Lindsay called on a Wednesday morning. We need to meet. Today. Her report was thorough and damning. Kyle Morgan had gambling debts totaling $43,000 to various bookmakers around Las Vegas. He visited casinos 4 to 5 times per week, usually when Danielle was traveling. Those investment meetings he'd told her about. They were poker games in back rooms and sports betting parlors. He's in deep, Lindsay explained, spreading photographs across the diner table. These men don't play around. He's missed 3 payments already. They're putting pressure on him. I stared at the images. Kyle, tense and sweating, meeting with hard-looking men in parking lots. Kyle at a blackjack table at 2 a.m., chips piled high, then gone. Kyle outside a bookmaker's office, shoulders slumped in defeat. Does my daughter know any of this? No evidence she does. He's careful to keep his gambling separate from his home life. She's gone so much, it's easy for him to hide. That's when I understood the full picture. Kyle hadn't just married Danielle, hoping to eventually inherit money. He was desperate now. Those debts were immediate, pressing. He needed money fast, and he'd been increasingly aggressive about trying to access mine. There's more, Lindsay added, pushing another photo forward. He's been asking questions around town. About you, about your assets. He contacted your former business partner last week, claiming he was helping you organize estate planning. Asked about the value of your pawnshop sale. A cold anger settled in my chest. This wasn't just greed anymore. This was active hunting. He was circling, looking for weaknesses, trying to find where I kept my money. I needed to control this situation before it controlled me. The plan formed slowly over the next few days. I couldn't just confront Kyle. He'd deny everything, manipulate Danielle, maybe even escalate. I couldn't cut Danielle off. She'd resent me forever. No, I needed something elegant, something that would expose him completely while protecting my daughter. I thought about my old pawn shop on Industrial Road, the one I'd kept the building for. Mostly I used it for storage now, but the 3rd floor still had my old office. Heavy door, reinforced frame. I'd kept it secure because, well, old habits die hard. An idea crystallized. If Kyle was hunting my money, what if I gave him something to find? Something irresistible. Something that would force him to show his true nature so clearly. Even Danielle couldn't deny it. I started making preparations. Ordered equipment online. Made phone calls to technicians I'd used in the past. And I waited for the right moment. That moment came at a family dinner, 2 weeks later. Danielle was home briefly between trips. Kyle was unusually quiet, probably stressed about his debts. Over dessert, I mentioned, casually as if it were nothing, that I needed to check on the storage facility on Industrial Road. Storage facility? Danielle asked. Just the old office building. I keep some valuables there. Family items, important documents, that sort of thing. I felt Kyle's attention lock onto me like a laser. He tried to sound casual. Valuables? Like what? Oh, you know. Things from the business. Gold pieces I couldn't bear to sell. Some cash reserves. Nothing for you two to worry about. I waved it off, as if dismissing it, but I'd baited the hook perfectly. I saw it in Kyle's eyes. Hunger, calculation, desperate hope. He'd taken the bait. Now I just had to wait for him to bite down. The trap was set. Now came the hardest part, waiting while pretending nothing had changed. 2 weeks crawled by. I maintained my routine with deliberate normalcy. Monday morning poker games at the Silver State Club. Wednesday afternoons at estate sales, hunting for vintage timepieces. Friday dinners at my favorite steakhouse. Everything exactly as it had been, as it should be. But beneath the surface, I was watching Kyle with the intensity of a jeweler, examining a suspect stone under a loupe. Mid-August arrived with the suffocating heat that makes Las Vegas feel like you're living inside an oven. Danielle left for Phoenix on a Tuesday morning, another 4-day hotel management conference. She kissed Kyle goodbye at their door. I happened to be dropping off some mail that had been delivered to my address by mistake. The affection in her eyes made my chest tight. She had no idea who she'd married. "Take care of yourself, honey," she called out, climbing into her rental car. "Don't let Dad work you too hard if you visit him." Kyle waved, all smiles. The moment her car turned the corner, his expression shifted. The mask dropped for just a second. Frustration, calculation, hunger. Then he noticed me watching, and the smile snapped back into place. "Hey, Cecil. Need help with anything while Danielle's gone?" "I'm fine," I said evenly. "You focus on your work." He nodded, but his eyes were elsewhere. Already planning something, I could tell. The question was, would he actually go through with it? I didn't have to wait long for my answer. The next morning, I got the call from Daniel Ortiz, my security guard at the Industrial Road building. Former cop, solid guy, had worked for me for 6 years, watching over my old properties. I'd briefed him on the situation, told him what I suspected might happen. His voice came through my phone, calm and professional. "Mr. Harrison, we've got movement. Your son-in-law was here last night around 9 p.m., sat in his car across the street for about 45 minutes, just watching the building." I felt a dark satisfaction settle in my gut. He's casing the place. Looks like it. Saw him taking pictures with his phone. He left when my shift started at 10. Perfect. Let's give him what he's looking for. Tomorrow morning, call me at 10 a.m. Make sure you're somewhere Kyle might overhear. I'll bet he's keeping tabs on Danielle's house, maybe even mine. Talk loud enough to be heard. Mention the address. Mention the amount. Let's see if he takes the bait all the way down. "You sure about this?" Daniel asked quietly. "Once we do this, there's no going back." I've never been more sure of anything. The next morning, I positioned myself in my car down the street from Kyle and Danielle's place in Henderson. Sure enough, at exactly 10 a.m., my phone rang. Daniel's voice boomed through the speaker. I turned the volume up deliberately. "Yes, Mr. Harrison, I checked the storage facility on Industrial Road this morning. Everything's secure, locks are solid. The $5 million in gold and cash, all accounted for." I let him talk a bit longer, adding details about the reinforced door on the 3rd floor and limited security cameras in that district. Made it sound just vulnerable enough to be tempting. Through my windshield, I saw Kyle's shadow pass by the kitchen window. He was home. Had he heard? I drove back to my house, forcing myself to be patient. Lindsay Adams called that afternoon with confirmation. "He's moving," she said without preamble. "Went to a hardware store on Boulder Highway 20 minutes ago. Came out with a crowbar and a heavy-duty flashlight. Then he drove to Industrial Road, spent an hour sitting in a coffee shop across from your building. He's planning something. Keep watching him. I need to know his exact movements." Over the next few days, Lindsay's reports painted a picture of a man spiraling into desperation and greed. Kyle visited the building 3 more times, studying the entrances, timing the security rotations, checking sight lines. He bought dark clothing from a sporting goods store, black hoodie, black jeans, gloves. He was actually going to do it. The fascinating part? His justifications. Lindsay had managed to bug his car during one of her surveillance runs, and she played me a recording of Kyle talking to himself during a drive. "It's family money." His voice came through tinny but clear. "Danielle's his daughter. Technically, that makes it partly hers, which means it's partly mine. The old bastard is just hoarding it out of spite. He's probably got millions more stashed away somewhere. This is barely a fraction of what he has. It's not really stealing if it's from family." I listened to him rationalize, justify, excuse. Fascinating how people convince themselves their worst impulses are actually virtuous. He wasn't stealing, he was claiming what's rightfully his. He wasn't betraying his wife, he was providing for their future. The mental gymnastics were almost impressive. "Keep the surveillance tight," I told Lindsay. "I want to know the moment he makes his move." Meanwhile, I prepared Daniel. Called him to the Industrial Road building one evening, showed him exactly what I needed. "When he breaks in, and he will break in, I need you to act panicked. Call me immediately. Make it sound like you're terrified. But keep all 8 cameras recording. I need crystal clear footage of his face, his actions, his words, especially his words." "You want him to incriminate himself completely," Daniel said, understanding dawning. "I want him to hand me everything I need to protect my daughter from him. Forever." We went through the plan 3 times. Daniel would accidentally leave the side entrance slightly ajar. The reinforced door to the storage room would look secure, but would give way easily to the crowbar. I'd already had the locks loosened just enough. The lighting would trigger automatically when the door opened, giving the cameras perfect visibility. "One more thing," I added. "I'll be parked 2 blocks away that night. When you call me, I'll be there in under 10 minutes. I want to see his face when he realizes what he's done." "You're really going to confront him?" "Oh, yes. He needs to understand exactly how thoroughly he's destroyed his life, and I'm going to be the one to tell him." Daniel left, and I stood alone in that old office, imagining how it would play out. Kyle, drunk on greed and desperation, breaking into what he thought was a fortune. The moment of triumph, then the shattering realization. I'd spent 2 decades in the pawn business, learning to spot fakes. Knew every trick, every scam, every way people tried to pass off brass as gold. I'd installed elaborate security systems to protect real valuables. Learned to read body language, to detect lies. Kyle thought he was clever, but he was an amateur playing against someone who'd built a career on seeing through deception. The irony was perfect. He wanted my money. He'd get nothing but consequences. Several more days passed. September arrived, bringing slightly cooler evenings but no relief from the tension. Lindsay reported that Kyle was getting more erratic, snapping at clients, making mistakes at work, drinking more. The pressure of his gambling debts, combined with the temptation I'd dangled in front of him, was crushing him. Then on a Thursday evening, Lindsay called with urgency in her voice. He just picked a fight with Danielle on the phone, told her not to come home early from her Phoenix trip, said he needed space to think. "She's confused and hurt, but she's staying there through the weekend." "He's clearing the field," I said quietly, making sure she's not here to interfere. "My guess? He moves within the next 72 hours, probably after dark tomorrow or the day after." I called Daniel immediately. "Get ready. It's happening soon." That night, I barely slept. Lay in bed thinking about Danielle, about the little girl who used to climb into my lap and demand I read her stories about princesses and dragons. She'd always cheered for the knights who rescued people, believed in heroes and justice and happy endings. Now I was going to show her that sometimes the dragon wears a wedding ring, and sometimes the knight is just a father who refused to let his daughter be devoured. The next morning, Friday, Lindsay confirmed it. He called in sick to work. Told his boss he has the flu. He's preparing Cecil tonight or tomorrow night. Stay close. The moment he moves toward Industrial Road after sunset, you call me and Daniel simultaneously. I spent that Friday in a strange state of calm anticipation. Had lunch at my usual spot, worked on cleaning a 1940s Omega watch from my collection, even took a nap in the afternoon. Needed to be sharp for what was coming. As evening approached, I dressed carefully. Comfortable clothes, good shoes, phone fully charged. Drove to my predetermined parking spot 2 blocks from the Industrial Road building. Sat there in the gathering darkness, watching the sky turn from orange to purple to black. My phone buzzed. Lindsay. "He's moving. Left his house 10 minutes ago wearing dark clothes. Heading toward downtown." "Daniel," I called the security guard immediately. "I'm ready, Mr. Harrison. All cameras are recording. Side door is positioned exactly as you wanted." I settled back in my seat to wait. Checked my watch. An vintage Rolex Submariner, bought with my first real profit from the pawn business 30 years ago. Fitting that it would mark this moment. The minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness. Then at exactly 7:47 p.m., my phone rang. Daniel's voice came through, pitched high with fake panic. "Mr. Harrison, your son-in-law is here. He has a crowbar. He's breaking into the storage room. What do I do?" I started my engine, already pulling out. "Stay calm, Daniel. Record everything. I'm on my way." This was it. The trap was springing shut. I made the 2-block drive in under 3 minutes, parking half a block away where Kyle wouldn't spot my car immediately. Killed the engine and sat for a moment, letting my heartbeat steady. Everything hinged on the next few minutes. Timing, precision, control. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. He's inside the room, loading gold bars into a backpack, talking to himself. Audio is clear. Perfect. I gave it another minute, letting Kyle sink deeper into his crime, letting the cameras capture every second of his betrayal. Then I stepped out into the warm September night and walked toward the building. The side entrance Daniel had left ajar was in a shadowed alcove, away from the sparse streetlights. I slipped inside, moving quietly up the concrete stairs. The building still smelled like it had when I'd run my pawn business here. Metal, dust, old paper. How many people had walked through these doors over 20 years? How many desperate souls had I watched try to sell me their grandmother's jewelry, their deceased father's watch collection, their wedding rings after divorces? I'd seen human nature at its most vulnerable in this building. Now I was about to see it at its most contemptible. Third floor. I could see light spilling from the storage room at the end of the hall, hear the clinking of metal, heavy breathing. Kyle, loading up his backpack with what he thought was genuine gold. I pulled out my phone, texted Daniel, "Coming in now. Get ready for your performance." I moved down the hallway, footsteps silent. Through the doorway, I could see Kyle's back, black hoodie, gloves, crowbar lying on the floor beside him. He was actually doing it, breaking into what he believed was my fortune, stealing from his wife's father, betraying every promise he'd made to Danielle. The camera above the door had a perfect angle. So did the three others I could see positioned around the room. Every movement, every word, every expression, all being captured in high definition. I pulled out my phone and called Daniel, who was waiting in the building's front security office. He answered on the first ring, his voice loud enough to carry. "Mr. Harrison? Thank goodness. He's in the storage room right now, loading everything into—" Kyle spun around, eyes wide with shock and fear. His face was flushed, sweating despite the building's air conditioning. The backpack at his feet bulged with gold bars. "Who are you talking to?" he shouted, lunging forward and grabbing the phone from Daniel's hand. Or so he thought. Daniel was actually alone in the security office, playing his part perfectly. I watched Kyle's face cycle through emotions. Shock, fear, anger, then desperate calculation. He'd been caught, but he wasn't ready to give up yet. That was typical. People never think they'll really face consequences until those consequences arrive. I let him stew for 30 seconds, listening to him frantically try to plan his next move. Then I stepped into the room. "Hello, Kyle." He spun toward me so fast he nearly tripped over the backpack. His mouth opened and closed, searching for words. The crowbar was at his feet. For a second I wondered if he'd actually be stupid enough to threaten me with it, but even Kyle wasn't that far gone. "Cecil, I can explain. This isn't what it looks like." I leaned against the door frame, arms crossed, taking in the scene. The open backpack, the gloves, the scattered gold bars on the shelves, the broken lock on the floor. I let the silence stretch, watching him squirm. "Really?" I said finally, my voice calm. "Because what it looks like is my son-in-law breaking into my property with a crowbar to steal what he thinks is $5 million in gold and cash. But please, explain how I'm misunderstanding the situation." "It's Danielle's father. This is family money. I thought—" He was babbling now, grasping at justifications. "You've been hoarding all this wealth while we struggle. It's not fair. Danielle deserves better than a gambling addict with $43,000 in debts to bookmakers." I cut him off. "Danielle deserves better than a husband who lies about investment meetings while he's actually playing poker in casino back rooms. Danielle deserves better than a man who married her to get access to her father's money." His face went white. How did I know?" I pushed off the doorframe, taking a step into the room. "Kyle, I spent 20 years running pawn shops. I learned to spot a con artist by the time they finished walking through the door. You think I didn't see through you from day one?" He grabbed one of the gold bars from the shelf, holding it up like proof. "This is real. This is worth—" "That's gold-plated brass," I said flatly. "Worth about $17 in scrap metal. The cash in those bundles? Real $100 bills on top and bottom, newspaper in the middle. Total actual value of everything in this room? About $340. I watched the realization hit him like a physical blow. His grip on the bar loosened, and it dropped to the floor with a dull thud. Not the ring of real gold, but the dead sound of cheap metal. You set this up," he whispered. "This was a trap." "Congratulations," I said dryly. "You're not as stupid as you look. Yes, this was a trap. I've known about your gambling debts for weeks. I've known about your lies, your manipulation, your plans to get your hands on my assets. I gave you exactly what you wanted. Information about a fortune in a poorly secured location. And you, being exactly who I knew you were, couldn't resist. His eyes darted around the room, finally noticing the cameras. One above the door, one in each corner, one on the wall behind the shelves, all with their little red recording lights. Those are all recording, I confirmed. Have been since you broke that lock. We have crystal clear footage of you breaking and entering, threatening my security guard, attempting to steal what you believed was $5 million, and confessing that you thought you were entitled to family money. We have audio of everything you've said. In Nevada, breaking and entering with intent to commit theft is burglary. That's a Category B felony, Kyle. 1 to 10 years in prison. He tried one more desperate play. You can't do this. I'm married to your daughter. Danielle will never forgive you for setting me up. Danielle will forgive me when she sees the video of you screaming about how all of this should be yours, I replied calmly. When she learns about your gambling debts that you hid from her. When she realizes you married her as an investment, not out of love. She'll forgive me for protecting her from a con artist? Kyle's face cycled through rage, fear, and desperation. He looked at the door, clearly considering running. I pulled out my phone. Daniel's already called the police. They'll be here in about 4 minutes. You can run if you want. We have your face on camera, your threats on audio, and your fingerprints on that crowbar. Or you can sit down, shut up, and wait for them to arrive. Your choice. He sagged then, the fight going out of him, sank down onto the floor, back against the wall, head in his hands. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Why? He asked, voice muffled. Why go through all this? You could have just told Danielle about my debts. Because you would have lied your way out of it, I said. You're good at lying, Kyle. You've had a lot of practice. Danielle loves you. She would have believed whatever story you spun. She would have blamed me for being suspicious, for not trusting her judgment. No, I needed her to see the truth in a way she couldn't deny. I needed you to expose yourself. I heard sirens in the distance, getting closer. Kyle heard them too. He looked up at me with hollow eyes. I just wanted to take care of her, he said weakly. No, I corrected. You wanted to take care of yourself. There's a difference. The sirens grew louder, pulling up outside. I heard car doors slamming, footsteps on the stairs. Daniel appeared in the doorway, 2 uniformed police officers behind him. Officers, I said calmly. Thank you for responding so quickly. This man broke into my property with a crowbar and attempted to steal what he believed were valuable items. We have everything on video. The next 30 minutes were a blur of official procedure. Officers taking statements, examining the scene, reviewing the camera footage on Daniel's tablet. Kyle tried to explain, to justify, to make excuses, but the evidence was overwhelming. They cuffed him, read him his rights, led him away. As they walked him past me toward the stairs, Kyle looked at me one last time. I'll make you pay for this. No, I said quietly. You'll pay for this. That's how consequences work. After they took him away, I stood alone in that storage room, looking at the scattered fake gold bars and the broken lock. Daniel appeared beside me. That went exactly as planned, he said. Yes, it did. I felt tired suddenly, the adrenaline draining away. Thank you, Daniel. I couldn't have done this without you. What happens now? Now? I picked up one of the brass bars, turning it over in my hands. Now I have to tell my daughter that her husband is a criminal. That's going to be the hardest conversation of my life. But it was necessary. Danielle needed to see the truth, and thanks to 8 high-definition cameras and Kyle's own greed, she would. 2 days later, I got the call I'd been waiting for. He's moving tonight, Lindsay's voice came through my phone, urgent but controlled. Just picked a fight with Danielle over the phone. Told her to stay in Phoenix through the weekend, that he needs space. She's upset, but agreed. I was in my workshop, a 1952 Patek Philippe, disassembled on the bench in front of me. My hands were steady as I set down the tiny screwdriver. What time? My guess? After dark. He called in sick to work, told his boss he has food poisoning. He's clearing his schedule, making sure no one expects to see him. Keep eyes on him. The moment he heads toward Industrial Road, You call me and Daniel simultaneously. I hung up and sat there for a moment, surrounded by my collection of timepieces. Hundreds of hours of painstaking work represented on these shelves, cleaning, restoring, preserving mechanical precision, each watch a testament to patience and attention to detail. Kyle thought he was being clever, thought he'd found an opportunity. He had no idea he was walking into a mechanism I'd built specifically for him, every gear calibrated to trap him at the exact right moment. The waiting was almost over. That evening I dressed carefully. Dark jeans, comfortable shoes, a plain gray shirt. Nothing fancy. I wasn't going to a show. I was going to spring a trap. I made sure my phone was fully charged, grabbed my car keys, and drove to my predetermined position, 2 blocks from the Industrial Road building. The September night was warm, the sky deepening from orange to purple as the sun set behind the mountains. I parked where I had a clear view of the street, but wouldn't be immediately visible. Checked my watch, 7:15 p.m. Checked my phone, fully charged, everything ready. Then came the hard part, waiting. I thought about Danielle, probably sitting in her Phoenix hotel room right now, wondering why her husband had pushed her away, thinking it was about stress or work or their relationship, not realizing he'd orchestrated the distance so he could commit a felony. My phone buzzed. Lindsay. He just left his house, wearing dark clothes, carrying a backpack, heading downtown. My pulse quickened, but my hands remained steady. Daniel? I switched to the other line. My security guard answered immediately. Ready, Mr. Harrison, all cameras recording. Side doors positioned exactly as discussed. Good. Stay sharp. This is happening. I settled back in my seat, watching the street. The minutes crawled by with agonizing slowness. 7:30, 7:40, 7:45. Then I saw him. Kyle's car, a silver Lexus sedan that he'd bought to impress clients, crept past the building once, slowly, checking for activity. He circled the block, came back, finally parked 3 spaces down from the side entrance. Sat there for a full minute, engine idling, probably wrestling with his conscience. I almost hoped he'd back out, hoped he'd realize what a catastrophic mistake he was about to make and just drive away. It would complicate things, but it would also mean he had some shred of decency left. But greed and desperation are powerful motivators. Kyle turned off his engine, grabbed his backpack from the passenger seat, and stepped out into the evening shadows. He was wearing all black, hoodie pulled up, dark jeans, gloves already on his hands. He looked around nervously, checking the empty street, then moved quickly toward the side entrance. I pulled out my phone, keeping it below the dashboard, and texted Daniel. He's approaching now. The response came back immediately. Side doors ready, cameras recording. I watched Kyle try the handle, saw his surprise when it opened easily. He glanced around one more time, then slipped inside. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Now he was inside, climbing the stairs to the 3rd floor, approaching the storage room where he thought $5 million was waiting for him. Walking directly into the trap. I gave him 5 minutes. Let him find the room, work on the lock, get inside. Let him see the gold bars, the cash bundles. Let the rush of victory flood through him. Let him think he'd won. My phone vibrated. A text from Daniel. He's inside the room. Loading items into backpack. Audio clear. Getting threatening now. Perfect. I started my car, pulled out slowly, drove the 2 blocks to the building. Parked right in front this time. No reason to hide anymore. Kyle's car sat there in the shadows, evidence of his presence. I walked to the side entrance, let myself in with my key, and climbed the stairs. Could hear sounds from above, metal scraping, heavy breathing, the thud of objects being moved. Kyle stuffing his backpack with fake fortune. 3rd floor, light spilling from the storage room doorway at the end of the hall. I pulled out my phone and called Daniel, who was stationed in the front security office. Mr. Harrison? He answered loudly, playing his part. Thank goodness. He's in the storage room right now, loading everything. I heard Kyle's voice from inside the room, sharp with panic and aggression. Who are you talking to? Give me that phone. Good. He was panicking, making mistakes. I ended the call and moved down the hallway, footsteps silent on the worn carpet. At the doorway, I paused, taking in the scene. Kyle stood in the center of the room, backpack open at his feet, bulging with brass bars he thought were gold. He was holding one of the bundles of cash, face flushed with exertion and excitement. The overhead fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows, made him look almost manic. All 8 cameras had perfect angles on him. Every movement, every expression, every word being recorded in crystal clarity. I checked my watch. 7:58 p.m. Let him have 2 more minutes of hope. 2 more minutes of thinking he'd gotten away with it. At exactly 8 p.m., I stepped into the doorway. "Hello, Kyle." The effect was instantaneous. He spun toward me so fast he nearly lost his balance, the cash bundle dropping from his hands. His face cycled through shock, fear, then desperate calculation, as his mind raced to find an explanation, an excuse, anything. "Cecil, I can explain." I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, taking my time to study him. The black hoodie, the gloves, the crowbar lying on the floor next to a broken lock, the backpack stuffed with fake gold, the security cameras overhead, their little red lights blinking in steady rhythm. "I'm listening," I said calmly. "Explain to me why my son-in-law is breaking into my property with a crowbar at 8 o'clock on a Friday night." Kyle's mouth opened and closed several times before words finally came out. Cecil, you have to understand. This is family money. Danielle is your daughter, which means this is partly hers, which means you thought you'd just take it." I finished for him. Interesting logic. He grabbed one of the gold bars from the shelf, held it up like evidence in his defense. His hand was shaking. "Look at all this. You're hoarding wealth while your own daughter struggles, while we can barely—" "Stop," I cut him off. "Let's be precise about something. You and Danielle have a combined household income of $172,000 a year. That puts you in the top 20% of American earners. You're not struggling. You're drowning in gambling debts." His face went white. The gold bar trembled in his grip. What are you talking about?" $43,000 to various bookmakers around Las Vegas," I continued, my voice level and calm. 4 to 5 casino visits per week when Danielle's traveling. Those investment meetings you told her about? Poker games and sports betting? Should I go on? He dropped the bar. It hit the floor with a dull thud, not the ring of precious metal, but the dead sound of cheap brass. He stared at it, and I saw the first flicker of real understanding cross his face. "That sound," he said slowly. "That's not... gold?" I pushed off the doorframe and walked into the room. "No, Kyle, it's not. It's brass with gold plating, worth about $17 per bar at current scrap prices. The cash?" I picked up one of the bundles he'd dropped, fanned it out. Real hundreds on top and bottom, newspaper in the middle. Probably learned that trick from some movie. I watched his face as comprehension dawned. The color drained from his cheeks, leaving him pale as chalk. His eyes darted around the room, to the cameras he'd never noticed, to the carefully staged shelves, to the backpack full of worthless metal. This was a trap," he whispered. "Congratulations, you're catching on." I tossed the cash bundle back onto the shelf. "Let me walk you through what just happened. You broke into my property. That's criminal trespass. You used that crowbar to break the lock. That's burglary with tools. You threatened Daniel, my security guard. That's criminal threatening. And you attempted to steal what you believed was $5 million. That's attempted grand larceny." Kyle's legs seemed to give out. He sagged against the wall, eyes wide with dawning horror. No, I didn't mean... This was for Danielle. For us." "Really?" I picked up one of the brass bars, weighed it in my hand. "Because what the cameras recorded was you screaming, 'This is all mine. All mine.' Didn't hear much about Danielle in that declaration." His eyes fixed on the cameras, one mounted above the door, one in each corner, others positioned to capture every angle, all of them with their red recording lights steady and bright. All of them are recording?" His voice cracked. "Since the moment you broke that lock. High-definition video, crystal clear audio. We have you breaking in, threatening Daniel, loading up stolen property, and making several very incriminating statements about your intentions. Nevada Revised Statutes. 205.0 Pas 60 defines burglary as entering a structure with intent to commit theft. That's a Category B felony, Kyle. 1 to 10 years in state prison. The transformation in his face was remarkable. I'd seen it before in my pawn shop. The moment someone realized they'd been caught, that there was no talking their way out, no clever excuse that would work. His expression cycled through shock, denial, fear, and finally, rage. "You set me up," he snarled, pushing off the wall. "You planned this whole thing. You put that fake gold here. You left the door open. I protected my property with security measures," I interrupted. "You chose to break in. You chose to bring a crowbar. You chose to threaten my employee. I didn't make you do anything, Kyle. You did this all by yourself." He looked around frantically like a trapped animal searching for an escape. His eyes landed on the crowbar. For a second I thought he might actually be stupid enough to grab it, to threaten me. But even in his panic, some survival instinct stopped him. Instead, he lunged for his phone in his pocket, fingers fumbling with the screen. "I'm leaving. You can't prove anything. I'll say you invited me here. This is all." "You'll say what exactly?" I pulled out my own phone, tapped the screen. Daniel's voice came through on speaker, tinny but clear. "Mr. Harrison, your son-in-law is here with a crowbar. He's threatening me. What should I do?" Kyle froze. "That call happened 6 minutes ago," I continued. "Daniel's already contacted the police. They're en route now. I'd estimate—" I checked my watch. "About 3 minutes until they arrive. You can run if you want. We have clear footage of your face, your car, your license plate. Or you can stay here and try to explain to the officers why you broke into my building with a crowbar and a backpack full of stolen property." His face had gone from white to gray, a sickly color I'd never seen on a living person before. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the air conditioning. His hands trembled as he lowered the phone. "You can't do this," he said, but his voice had lost all its strength. "I'm married to Danielle. She'll never forgive you. This will destroy your relationship with her." "No," I said quietly. "You destroyed it. You married her for money. You lied to her about gambling debts. You sneaked around behind her back. And tonight, you committed multiple felonies trying to steal from her father. When she sees the video, and she will see it, she'll understand exactly who you are." I heard sirens in the distance, getting closer. Kyle heard them too. His eyes widened, the last color draining from his face. "Please," he whispered. "Cecil, please. I made a mistake. I can fix this. I'll get help for the gambling. You'll face the consequences of your choices," I finished. "That's what happens in the real world, Kyle. Actions have consequences." The sirens grew louder, pulling up outside the building. Red and blue lights flashed through the windows, painting the walls in alternating colors. I heard car doors slamming, heavy footsteps on the stairs. Kyle's knees buckled. He slid down the wall, sitting on the floor next to his backpack, full of fake gold, the crowbar, the broken lock. A man who'd gambled everything on one desperate play and lost spectacularly. Daniel appeared in the doorway with 2 uniformed police officers behind him. "Officers," I said calmly, "thank you for the quick response. This man broke into my property with a crowbar and attempted to steal valuable items. We have everything documented on security cameras." As they moved to handcuff Kyle, as they read him his rights, as Daniel pulled up the video footage on his tablet to show them, I stood there watching Kyle's world collapse around him. His face had settled into a mask of numb shock. He didn't resist as they pulled him to his feet, didn't protest as they cuffed his hands behind his back. Just stared at nothing, mind probably trying to process how completely he'd destroyed his life in one evening. They led him toward the stairs. As he passed me, he looked up, met my eyes one last time. "I'll make you pay for this," he said weakly. I didn't smile, didn't gloat, just held his gaze and spoke the truth. "No, Kyle, you'll pay for this. That's how justice works." They took him away. I stood in that storage room, surrounded by fake gold and prop money and high-definition cameras, and felt the weight of what came next settling on my shoulders. Now I had to tell Danielle what her husband had done. The police took Kyle to the Clark County Detention Center for booking. Bail was set at $25,000, standard for a Category B felony burglary charge. I gave my statement to the officers, provided copies of the security footage, and watched as they drove away with Kyle handcuffed in the back seat. Daniel and I spent the next hour cleaning up the storage room, putting the fake gold bars back on shelves, documenting the damage to the door and lock for insurance purposes. Neither of us spoke much. What was there to say? The trap had worked perfectly. Around midnight, I finally drove home. Sat in my driveway for 10 minutes before going inside, trying to prepare myself for what came next. Danielle would be back from Phoenix the next morning. I needed to tell her before Kyle did, before he could spin some manipulative version of events. I called Jordan Campbell, my attorney, a sharp-minded man in his late 50s, who'd handled my business legal work for years. He answered on the third ring, voice alert despite the late hour. "Cecil, everything all right? I need you at my house tomorrow morning, early. My daughter's coming home, and she needs to hear something from both of us." "This is about Kyle Morgan? You heard already?" "Small legal community in Vegas. Word travels fast when someone gets arrested for felony burglary." He paused. "You set him up, didn't you?" "I gave him an opportunity to reveal his true character. He chose to take it." Jordan was quiet for a moment. "Tomorrow morning. What time?" 8 o'clock. Danielle's flight lands at 7:15. She'll be home by 8:30. I'll be there." I barely slept that night. Kept seeing Danielle's face in my mind, the way she'd looked at her wedding, radiant and happy, believing she'd found someone who loved her. How would she look when she learned the truth? The next morning, Jordan arrived at 8 sharp, carrying a leather briefcase and 2 cups of coffee from the Starbucks on Charleston Boulevard. "Thought you might need this," he said, handing me one. "Bless you." I took a long drink. "Did you review the video?" "Watched it 3 times. It's damning. Kyle's own words convict him completely. The all mine scream alone." He shook his head. No jury would sympathize with that. We sat in my living room, waiting. I kept checking my watch. 8:15, 8:20, 8:27. At 8:32, I heard her car pull into the driveway. My heart seized. This was it. The moment I'd been dreading since this whole thing started. I stood up, moved to the window, watched Danielle climb out of her car with her carry-on bag. She looked tired, confused, probably wondering why I'd asked her to come straight here instead of going home. She walked up the path. I opened the door before she could knock. "Dad?" She looked past me, saw Jordan standing in the living room. "What's going on? Why is your attorney here? Is something wrong?" "Come inside, sweetheart. We need to talk." The worry on her face intensified. "You're scaring me. What happened? Are you sick?" "I'm fine. It's about Kyle." Her expression shifted, confusion mixing with defensive protectiveness. "Kyle? What about him? He wasn't answering his phone last night. I thought maybe—" "Danielle!" I kept my voice gentle but firm. "Come sit down, please." She followed me into the living room, set down her bag, perched on the edge of the sofa. Jordan stood by the fireplace, professional and calm. "Danielle," he began, "I'm here in my capacity as your father's attorney, but also as a witness. What we're about to show you is difficult, but you need to see it." "Show me what?" Her voice rose with anxiety. "Where's Kyle? Why isn't he here?" I sat down beside her, pulled out my tablet. "Kyle was arrested last night. He's currently in the Clark County Detention Center, charged with burglary, criminal trespass, and attempted grand larceny." The color drained from her face. "What? That's impossible. Kyle wouldn't—" "Dad, what did you do?" That hurt, but I understood. She loved him. Of course, her first instinct was to defend him, to assume I'd somehow orchestrated this. "I didn't do anything," I said quietly. "Kyle did this to himself, but I need you to watch something before you make any judgments." I pulled up the security footage on the tablet, pressed play. The timestamp showed 7:52 p.m. the previous evening. Kyle appeared on screen, dressed in black, crowbar in hand, approaching the storage room door. Danielle's hand flew to her mouth. No, he wouldn't." We watched in silence as Kyle broke the lock, entered the room, saw the gold bars and cash, watched as his face transformed with greed and triumph. Then came the moment. Kyle loading items into his backpack, screaming at the ceiling, "This is all mine! All mine!" Danielle flinched like she'd been struck. Tears started streaming down her face. The video continued. Daniel appearing, Kyle threatening him. Then my arrival, the confrontation, Kyle's desperate attempts to justify his actions. The police showing up, reading him his rights, leading him away in handcuffs. When it ended, Danielle sat frozen, tears running unchecked down her cheeks. "That's not," she whispered. "That can't be real. You set him up. You put that gold there to trap him because you never liked him." "The gold was fake," I said gently. "Gold-plated brass. Worth about $340 total. The real question is, why did your husband break into my property with a crowbar to steal it?" "Because you—" "Because—" She was grasping for explanations, for anything that would make this not be true. Jordan stepped forward, voice professional but kind. "Danielle, I understand this is shocking, but the evidence is clear. Kyle committed multiple felonies. He's facing 1 to 10 years in Nevada State Prison." She turned on him, anger flashing through the grief. "This is entrapment. You can't just set up a trap and—" "It's not entrapment," Jordan interrupted gently. "Entrapment requires law enforcement to induce someone to commit a crime they wouldn't otherwise commit. Your father is a private citizen who secured his property with cameras. Kyle chose to break in. He chose to attempt theft. Those were his decisions." Danielle looked at me, eyes pleading. "Why would you do this? Why?" I pulled out the file Lindsay Adams had compiled, set it on the coffee table between us. "Because I needed you to see who you married. Open it." Her hands shook as she opened the folder. Her eyes widened as she scanned the pages. Photos of Kyle at casinos. Bank records showing the gambling losses. The $43,000 in debts to bookmakers. Credit card statements for secret accounts she'd never known about. "No," she breathed. "He told me those were business meetings. He said—" "He lied," I said simply. "About everything. The gambling, the debts, his financial situation. He married you because he thought it would give him access to my money." She was shaking now, pages slipping from her fingers. "You're wrong. He loves me. I know he does." I wanted to spare her this next part, but she needed to know everything. I pulled out the last document in the file, photos of Kyle with another woman, entering a hotel. The timestamps showed they were taken 4 months ago, while he and Danielle were already married. Danielle made a sound I'd never heard before, something between a sob and a gasp of pure pain. The folder fell from her hands, papers scattering across the floor. "I'm sorry, baby," I said, my own voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. But you deserve to know the truth. He didn't love you. He loved what he thought he could get from you." She collapsed against me then, sobbing like her heart was breaking, because it was. I held her, stroking her hair like I used to when she was little and had nightmares. Except this nightmare was real, and I couldn't protect her from it, only help her through it. Jordan quietly excused himself, saying he'd be in touch about the legal proceedings. Left us alone in the living room, Danielle crying on my shoulder while evidence of her husband's betrayal lay scattered at our feet. After a long time, her sobs quieted to hiccups. She pulled back, wiping her eyes with her sleeve. "I was so stupid," she whispered. "So blind." "You weren't stupid. You were in love, and he was a skilled manipulator. Even I wasn't completely sure until I had proof. The video—" She looked at the tablet, now dark. "When he screamed 'all mine,' he didn't even mention me. Like I didn't exist. Like I was just a means to an end. I know, sweetheart. I'm sorry." She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "What happens now?" "Now? Kyle goes to trial. You decide what you want to do about your marriage, and I help you through whatever comes next." She nodded slowly, a new hardness settling into her expression. The betrayal was transforming her grief into something stronger. "I want a divorce. No, an annulment. Can we get an annulment?" "Jordan will advise you on that. But yes, given that Kyle hid his debts and his gambling addiction before the marriage, that could be grounds for annulment based on fraud." "Good." She stood up, steadier now. "I want him gone from my life completely. Can I stay here for a while? I can't go back to that house. This is your home, Danielle. It always has been. Stay as long as you need." She hugged me again, tighter this time. "Thank you, Dad, for protecting me, even when I didn't want to be protected." The next few weeks were a blur of legal proceedings and emotional upheaval. Kyle made bail after 3 days. His mother mortgaged her house to cover it, and immediately started trying to salvage his situation. First, he tried calling Danielle. She blocked his number. He showed up at my house. I called the police and had him removed for trespassing. He sent flowers to her office with a card that read, "Please, we need to talk. I love you." She threw them in the trash. When direct contact failed, he changed tactics. A week after his arrest, Jordan called with news. "Kyle's filed a civil lawsuit against you. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. He's claiming you deliberately set a trap to destroy his marriage and reputation. He's seeking $250,000 in damages." I actually laughed. "Of course he is. What's his argument? That you created a situation specifically designed to entice him into committing a crime. That you acted with malicious intent toward him. His lawyer is arguing entrapment, even though that's a criminal defense, not a civil one. Can he win? Not a chance. But he can make noise, and he can try to turn public opinion. I've already seen him posting on social media vague references to family betrayal and vindictive in-laws. Some of Danielle's distant relatives are commenting in support. Let me guess. Cousin Rachel? And her husband. Also her uncle in Reno. They're saying you manipulated the situation, that Kyle deserves another chance." I sighed. This was the counterattack I'd expected. Kyle was scrambling, trying to control the narrative since he couldn't control the facts. "What's our response? We'll file a motion to dismiss. The case is frivolous. You secured your own property with cameras. There's nothing illegal or even questionable about that. Kyle broke in of his own volition. His emotional distress is self-inflicted." "When's the hearing?" "They've scheduled it for mid-October, both the civil case and his criminal preliminary hearing." Meanwhile, Kyle was spreading his version of events to anyone who'd listen. I heard it secondhand through Danielle, who was getting calls from concerned relatives. "He's telling people you set him up because you were jealous of our marriage," she told me one evening. We were sitting on my back patio, drinking iced tea in the warm September twilight. "That you never wanted me to be happy without you." "Do you believe that?" "No," she said it firmly. "I watched the video. I saw his face. That wasn't a man defending his family. That was pure greed." Still, Kyle's narrative was gaining some traction among people who didn't know the full story. Social media posts from mutual acquaintances suggested some believed his version, that he was a victim of an overbearing father-in-law's manipulation. Then Lindsay called with interesting news. "I did some more digging on Kyle," she said. "Found something you'll want to know about. He's been hiding income from Danielle. Has a separate bank account under his mother's address. Been depositing cash there for the past year. Looks like unreported commission income. About $18,000. Tax evasion? Possibly. Also means he lied to Danielle about their financial situation, claimed they were struggling while he had a secret nest egg. Send that to Jordan, and to Danielle's divorce attorney." The information proved useful. When Danielle filed for annulment based on fraud, Kyle having hidden his gambling debts and addiction before marriage, the hidden bank account supported her case. The man had lied about virtually everything. Kyle's attorney, a bottom-tier lawyer named Richard Chen, who seemed to take any case for the right price, advised him to accept a plea deal on the criminal charges. Plead guilty to reduced charges, get probation, avoid prison time, I heard through the legal grapevine. But Kyle refused. He was convinced he could beat the charges, or at least create enough doubt to avoid serious consequences. His ego wouldn't let him admit defeat. "The idiot thinks he can charm a jury," Jordan told me. His lawyers probably told him the trap defense won't work, but Kyle's not listening. The preliminary hearing arrived in early October. I sat in the courtroom gallery while the prosecutor presented the evidence. The video footage played on screens for the judge and attorneys to review. Even on the small courtroom monitors, Kyle's greed and malice were unmistakable. His attorney tried to argue that the situation was a family misunderstanding blown out of proportion, and that the defendant believed he had implicit permission to access family assets. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Barbara Rodriguez, looked at him over her reading glasses. "Counselor, are you seriously arguing that breaking a lock with a crowbar constitutes implicit permission?" "Your Honor, the relationship between a father and son-in-law creates certain expectations." "Does it create an expectation that one can commit burglary?" She shook her head. "Motion denied. This case will proceed to trial. The defendant's bail conditions remain in effect." Kyle's face went gray. He'd been so sure the charges would be dropped or reduced. Reality was finally penetrating his bubble of denial. Outside the courtroom, he tried one last desperate move. Approached Danielle where she stood with me and Jordan near the elevators. "Danny, please," he said, reaching for her arm. "You have to know I did this for us. I was trying to—" "Don't touch me," she pulled away sharply. "And don't call me that. You don't get to use my nickname anymore. But we can fix this. If you just tell them I had permission, that we discussed—" "You want me to lie under oath?" She stared at him like he was a stranger. "I watched the video, Kyle. You didn't say we or us once. You said mine. You threatened an innocent security guard. You destroyed our marriage for fake gold bars and prop money." His expression cycled between desperation and anger. "Your father manipulated you. Can't you see that? He's always hated me, and he used this to turn you against—" "No," Danielle interrupted, her voice cold. "You did this. You lied about gambling. You hid debts. You cheated on me. You broke into my father's building with a crowbar. These are your choices, your actions, not his." "Yours." Kyle's face twisted with rage. He turned to me. "This is your fault. You destroyed my life." "No," I said calmly. "You destroyed your own life. I just documented it." Security guards approached. Kyle had been getting loud, drawing attention. He backed away, shooting us a look of pure hatred, before his lawyer pulled him toward the exit. That evening, Danielle and I sat in my workshop. She watched me work on a 1960s Omega constellation, finding something soothing in the precise, methodical movements. "I almost married him again," she said quietly. "When we were dating, I had doubts, little things that felt off. But I convinced myself I was being paranoid, that I was too damaged from my first divorce to trust anyone. Your instincts were right. I ignored them because I wanted to believe in love again, in happy endings." She smiled sadly. "Turns out my happy ending was my dad protecting me from a con artist. You'll find real love eventually," I told her. "Someone who deserves you. Someone honest. Maybe. Or maybe I'll just focus on my career and my hobbies for a while. Learn to trust myself again." She watched me adjust a tiny gear. "Dad, where are the real $5 million? I smiled. "Fortress Vault Solutions. Private banking vault in a facility that makes Fort Knox look casual. Been there for 2 years, earning modest interest." "And that's for me, eventually? When the time is right, yes. But Danielle, you don't need it. You're successful on your own. That money is a safety net, not a life plan." She nodded. "I know, but it's nice to know it's there, protected by someone who actually cares about me." We sat in comfortable silence after that. The only sounds the ticking of my watch collection and the soft scrape of my tools. Outside, the October evening deepened toward night. Kyle was somewhere out there, probably raging at the world, blaming everyone but himself. But here, in my workshop, with my daughter beside me, I felt at peace. The trap had worked. Justice was unfolding, and Danielle was safe. The trial date arrived on a cool October morning. The Clark County Courthouse was busy with the usual flow of lawyers, defendants, and witnesses navigating the justice system. I sat in the gallery with Danielle on one side and Jordan on the other, watching Kyle fidget at the defense table. He'd lost weight since his arrest. His suit hung loose on his frame, and the confident swagger I'd seen at our first meeting had vanished completely. His cheap attorney, Richard Chen, kept whispering urgently to him, probably still trying to convince him to accept a plea deal. But Kyle's pride wouldn't allow it. The prosecutor was a sharp woman named Maria Santos, mid-40s, with a reputation for thorough preparation. She'd reviewed the evidence 3 times with me, making sure every detail was airtight. "All rise," the bailiff called. "The Honorable Judge Barbara Rodriguez presiding." Judge Rodriguez entered, the same stern woman from the preliminary hearing. She settled behind the bench, surveyed the courtroom with practiced eyes, and nodded for everyone to sit. "The state of Nevada versus Kyle Morgan," she announced. "Charges of burglary, criminal trespass, and attempted grand larceny. Is the prosecution ready?" "Yes, Your Honor." Maria stood confidently. "Is the defense ready?" Chen rose, less confident. "Yes, Your Honor." "Very well. Prosecution may present opening statements." Maria laid out the case with surgical precision, described how Kyle, motivated by gambling debts and greed, had broken into my property with a crowbar, how he'd threatened my security guard, how he'd attempted to steal what he believed was $5 million. Every word was backed by evidence she promised to present. Chen's opening was weaker, tried to paint Kyle as a confused son-in-law who'd made an error in judgment, based on misunderstandings about family assets. Even the jury looked skeptical. Then came the evidence. Maria played the security footage on large screens mounted throughout the courtroom. Every juror could see Kyle clearly, breaking the lock, entering the room, loading fake gold into his backpack. The audio played through speakers, and his voice echoed through the silent courtroom. "This is all mine, all mine." I watched the jury's faces, saw their expression shift from neutral to disapproving. A middle-aged woman in the front row actually shook her head in disgust when Kyle threatened Daniel on camera. Daniel testified next, described his position as my security guard, explained the security setup, confirmed that Kyle had no permission to be there. Under cross-examination, Chen tried to suggest Daniel had somehow entrapped Kyle by leaving the door unlocked. "So you deliberately made access easier?" Chen asked. "The door was slightly ajar," Daniel replied calmly. "But Mr. Morgan still broke a lock with a crowbar to enter the secured room. Nobody forced him to do that." I took the stand after lunch, described my relationship with Kyle, my concerns about his behavior, my decision to secure my property with cameras. Chen tried to make me sound vindictive. "Isn't it true you never liked Kyle Morgan?" "It's true I had concerns about his character," I answered honestly, "which is why I took measures to protect my property. Those concerns proved justified. But you deliberately set up a trap." "I protected my property with security systems," I interrupted calmly. "Your client chose to break in. I didn't force him to do anything." The metallurgist's testimony was almost entertaining. She examined one of the gold bars under a microscope, showed the jury the brass composition beneath the thin gold plating, confirmed it was worth about $17. When Chen suggested this somehow excused Kyle's actions, she looked at him like he'd lost his mind. "The defendant believed he was stealing $5 million, she said flatly. "The fact that the items were actually worthless doesn't change his intent or actions." The trial lasted 3 days. Kyle never took the stand. Chen wisely kept him off it, knowing he'd only incriminate himself further. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, Kyle's face had gone gray. He knew. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" Judge Rodriguez asked. The foreman stood, a retired teacher in his 60s. "We have, Your Honor. On the count of burglary in the second degree, how do you find?" "Guilty." Kyle's shoulders slumped. Beside him I saw Danielle's quiet exhale of relief. "On the count of criminal trespass?" "Guilty." "On the count of attempted grand larceny?" "Guilty." Chen requested leniency at sentencing, citing Kyle's difficult circumstances and lack of criminal history. Maria countered with the severity of the crime, the premeditation involved, the threat to Daniel. Judge Rodriguez listened to both sides, then delivered her sentence with firm authority. "Mr. Morgan, you planned and executed a deliberate break-in, motivated by greed and desperation. You threatened an innocent security guard. You attempted to steal what you believed was a substantial sum from your wife's father. This was not a momentary lapse in judgment. This was calculated criminal behavior." She paused, letting the words sink in. "I sentence you to 3 years, with 18 months to be served in the Nevada Department of Corrections, the remainder suspended pending good behavior. Additionally, you are ordered to pay a $12,000 fine and $8,500 in restitution for property damage. You will also pay all court costs." Kyle made a strangled sound. 18 months in actual prison. His attorney had probably promised him probation. "Furthermore," Judge Rodriguez continued, "the civil case Mr. Morgan filed against Mr. Harrison is dismissed with prejudice. The court finds it to be baseless, frivolous, and a transparent attempt at retaliation. Mr. Morgan is barred from filing any further legal action against Mr. Harrison related to these events." That was the final nail. Kyle's head dropped into his hands. "Bailiff, remand the defendant to custody." As they led Kyle away in handcuffs, he looked back at Danielle one last time. She stared straight ahead, refusing to meet his eyes. He'd lost everything, his freedom, his marriage, his reputation, and she'd moved on. Outside the courthouse, Danielle hugged me tight. "It's really over," she whispered. "It's really over," I confirmed. Later that week, her annulment came through. The court agreed that Kyle's hidden debts and gambling addiction constituted fraud sufficient to void the marriage. Danielle Harrison Morgan became just Danielle Harrison again. The bookmakers filed suit against Kyle for his outstanding debts. His real estate license was suspended. His employer terminated him for cause. Every domino I'd set up was falling exactly as planned. The following week, Danielle moved back into my house temporarily. Said she needed time to reset before finding her own place again. I was happy to have her home. We fell into a comfortable routine. She'd work during the day while I puttered around with my watch collection. Evenings we'd cook together, watch old movies, talk about everything except Kyle. She needed to move forward, not dwell on the past. One evening, about 2 weeks after the trial, we were sitting on the back patio. The November air had cooled pleasantly, and the desert sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and purple. Danielle nursed a glass of wine while I worked on a particularly stubborn 1958 Longines. "Dad," she said quietly. I keep thinking about how close I came to everything. If you hadn't caught him, if I'd never known, I could have spent years with him. Maybe had kids with him." I set down my tools, gave her my full attention. "But that didn't happen. You're safe now." "Because you protected me," she smiled sadly. "I'm sorry I didn't trust your instincts about him from the start." "Don't apologize. He was skilled at manipulation. Even I needed proof before I could be certain. Still, I should have listened." She took a sip of wine, stared at the horizon. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "The $5 million. Is it really in that bank vault?" I smiled. "Fortress Vault Solutions on Howard Hughes Parkway. Been there for 2 years, earning modest but stable returns. All properly documented. Taxes paid. Completely legal." "And it's for me, eventually?" "When the time is right, yes. But Danielle," I caught her eye, made sure she heard this part, "you don't need it. You're successful because of your own intelligence and hard work. That money is security, not a requirement for happiness." "I know," she nodded slowly. "Actually, knowing it exists, but not needing it, that feels better than anything. Like having a safety net I'll never have to use." "That's exactly what it is." She was quiet for a moment, then laughed softly. "You know what's funny? Kyle spent months obsessing over money. You didn't even keep it home. All that scheming, all that planning, and he was chasing shadows. 20 years in the pawn business taught me never to keep valuable items where people expect them to be. The obvious place is always the wrong place. Well, it worked. He destroyed his life over brass and newspaper." We sat in comfortable silence as the sun sank lower. I felt a deep satisfaction, not cruelty, not revenge, just justice. Kyle had made his choices. Now he was living with the consequences. The next day, a letter arrived. Prison mail, Kyle's handwriting on the envelope. I almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity won. Inside was 3 pages of handwritten plea. How sorry he was, how he'd made mistakes but deserved another chance. How Danielle should remember the good times and find it in her heart to forgive. How I'd overreacted and destroyed a family over a misunderstanding. I read it once, felt nothing but contempt, and tore it into small pieces, dropped them in the trash without a second thought. He still didn't understand. This wasn't about revenge. It was about protecting my daughter from a predator. That weekend, Danielle returned to work, threw herself into her hotel management career with renewed energy, said it felt good to focus on something she could control. I supported her however she needed. Sometimes that meant long phone conversations, sometimes just being there when she needed quiet company. A month later, she found her own apartment. Nice place in Summerlin, good neighborhood, completely separate from any memories of Kyle. I helped her move in, and we christened the new place with takeout Chinese food and a bottle of decent wine. "To fresh starts," she toasted. "To fresh starts," I echoed. She was healing, getting stronger. The woman who'd cried in my living room over video evidence of her husband's betrayal was transforming into someone wiser, more cautious, but not broken. She'd survive this. She'd thrive. One Saturday morning, a few weeks into her new place, my phone rang. Danielle's name on the screen. Hey, sweetheart. Everything okay? Everything's great. Actually, I was wondering, remember that vintage watch exhibition at the Springs Preserve? It's this weekend. Want to go with me? I smiled, warmth spreading through my chest. She was reaching out, rebuilding our relationship, choosing to spend time with her old man when she could be doing anything else. I'd love that. What time? Pick you up at 10? I'll be ready. After we hung up, I sat in my workshop, surrounded by my collection of timepieces, each one a testament to patience, precision, and the value of taking time to do things right. Kyle had wanted instant gratification, instant wealth. He'd rushed into crime thinking he'd found a shortcut. But there are no shortcuts. Not in watchmaking, not in life, not in justice. I picked up the 1958 Longines I'd been restoring, examined the movement under my loupe. Every gear perfectly aligned, every spring tensioned correctly. When I wound it and set it down, it ticked steadily, keeping perfect time. That's what I'd done with Kyle. Waited for the right moment. Set up every gear, every spring, every piece of the trap with precision. And when he'd walked into it, the mechanism had worked exactly as designed. Justice, I reflected, is a lot like watchmaking. It requires patience. It requires skill. And when done properly, it keeps perfect time. My phone buzzed with a text from Danielle. Can't wait for tomorrow. Love you, Dad. I texted back. Love you too, sweetheart. Outside, the November sun climbed higher into a clear Nevada sky. Somewhere across town, Kyle was adjusting to prison life, finally facing the consequences he'd spent so long avoiding. His bookmakers were pursuing legal judgments. His reputation was destroyed. His freedom was gone. And here I sat in my workshop, with my daughter safe and healing, my conscience clear, and justice served. The watch on my workbench ticked steadily on. Perfect time indeed. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.